They buried her alive for being barren, until a lonely cowboy dug her out and took her home. She had learned long ago how silence could feel heavier than words. In the small rural settlement where Elena lived, people rarely spoke directly about their thoughts. Yet their eyes revealed everything. Once, she had been greeted with smiles and warm invitations. Now, conversation stopped when she entered a room. Women who once sat beside her at gatherings turned their faces away, pretending to be busy. Children whispered behind her back, repeating phrases they had heard from adults. The change did not happen overnight, but it was steady and painful, like a slow storm that darkened the sky without warning. Elena tried to remember when things had started to shift. At first it was small remarks about family and expectations. People would ask gentle questions about her future, about when she would have children, about how happy she must be planning a growing household. She always answered politely, hiding the quiet sadness she carried. Years passed, and the questions became sharper. The smiles became thinner. Eventually, people stopped asking and started assuming. Her home had once felt like a safe place, but even there she felt pressure building. Her husband grew distant, weighed down by the expectations of others. He rarely spoke openly, yet his silence felt like judgment. Relatives visited more often, offering advice that sounded less like support and more like criticism. They spoke about tradition, about responsibility, about how a person's value was measured. Elena listened without arguing, because arguing would only bring more tension. Despite everything, she tried to remain hopeful. She helped neighbors when they needed assistance, cared for animals, and worked hard each day. She believed kindness would eventually soften people's hearts, but kindness alone could not break the cycle of fear and superstition that had taken root in the community. One afternoon during a village gathering, she noticed how people avoided sitting near her. Conversations flowed around her as if she were invisible. The air felt heavy with unspoken judgment. She left early, walking home slowly along the dusty path, wondering if she had become someone others pitied or feared. As time passed, the pressure intensified. Elders began speaking about tradition more often, reminding everyone about the importance of family and legacy. Their words were directed at the group, but Elena felt as if every sentence pointed toward her. She heard whispers that her presence brought bad luck. Though no one dared say it directly to her face, the rumors spread quietly but effectively, shaping how others treated her. Elena began spending more time alone, finding comfort in small routines. She woke early to watch the sunrise, enjoying the calm before the village came alive. She walked through fields, listening to the wind move through tall grass. These moments gave her strength, reminding her that life existed beyond the opinions of others. One evening, after a long day of work, she returned home to find several elders waiting outside. Their expressions were serious, their voices formal. They spoke about community harmony, about protecting traditions, about difficult decisions made for the greater good. Elena listened, confused and uneasy, as they spoke around the truth rather than directly addressing it. Fear settled into her chest as she realized that something had changed. She felt as if she were standing outside her own life, watching events unfold without control. The elders' words sounded final, though they avoided clear explanations. They suggested she should reflect on her place within the community and accept whatever came next with dignity. That night, Elena barely slept. The silence of her home felt heavy, filled with uncertainty. She replayed every conversation, every glance, trying to understand what she had done wrong. By morning she felt exhausted but determined to remain calm. She believed that even difficult situations could be resolved through patience. Later that day, several villagers approached her again. Their tone was firm, leaving little room for discussion. They guided her toward the outskirts of the settlement, speaking softly among themselves. Elena sensed danger but tried to remain composed, hoping that reason would prevail. She searched their faces for kindness but found only determination shaped by fear and belief. As they moved farther from the center of the village, the landscape became quiet and empty. The path ended near a patch of earth that looked freshly disturbed. Elena's heart began to race as she realized the seriousness of the situation. She asked questions, but the answers were vague, wrapped in words about sacrifice and tradition. In that moment, she felt a deep loneliness unlike anything she had known before. She understood that the people around her believed they were protecting something larger than her individual life. That realization hurt more than anger would have. She had lived among them for years, shared meals and laughter, and yet they now treated her like an outsider. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ground. The air grew cooler, and the wind carried distant sounds from the village. Elena felt time slowing as events moved forward with quiet certainty. She tried to remain strong, holding on to the belief that someone would step forward and stop what was happening. But no one did. Fear mixed with disbelief as she faced the reality of her situation. She struggled to understand how compassion could disappear so completely. Her thoughts raced through memories of kindness she had shared, wondering why none of it mattered now. Meanwhile, miles away, a solitary cowboy named Daniel rode across open land toward his ranch. He preferred distance from crowded places, finding peace in wide horizons and simple routines. His life followed a steady rhythm shaped by early mornings, hard work, and quiet evenings. People in nearby towns described him as reserved but dependable, someone who spoke little but observed everything. As the sky turned orange and purple, Daniel noticed unusual marks near the edge of the settlement's territory. The ground looked recently disturbed, out of place against the natural landscape. He slowed his horse, scanning the area carefully. Years of living close to nature had taught him to trust small signs that others might ignore. At first, he heard nothing except the wind. Then, faintly, a sound reached him, a weak voice carried across the air. He paused, unsure whether it was real or imagined. The sound came again, softer this time, but clear enough to make his heart race. Daniel dismounted quickly, moving toward the disturbed earth. Each step felt heavier than the last as realization began to form in his mind. He listened closely, confirming that someone was calling for help. Without hesitation, he grabbed a tool from his saddle and began digging. The soil was loose but heavy, slowing his progress. He worked with urgency, ignoring fatigue as he uncovered layers of earth. Time blurred as determination pushed him forward. Finally, he saw movement beneath the soil. A hand emerged, trembling, but alive. Relief and shock washed over him as he cleared more dirt, revealing Elena's face. She looked exhausted and frightened, her strength nearly gone. Daniel did not ask questions. He focused on freeing her carefully, supporting her as she struggled to breathe. The moment felt unreal, yet he moved with calm efficiency, driven by instinct rather than thought. As the last light of day faded, he wrapped her in his coat and lifted her gently. Elena barely understood what was happening, but she felt the warmth of safety replacing the cold fear that had surrounded her. She closed her eyes, trusting the stranger who had appeared at the moment she needed help most. The night settled around them as Daniel prepared to take her away from that place. Neither of them knew how their lives would change from this moment forward, but one thing was certain. The story that had almost ended in silence had just begun again. Elena felt weak, her body trembling from fear, cold, and exhaustion. She barely remembered the struggle, only flashes of earth pressing against her face, the panic in her chest, and the sharp edges of panic that refused to leave. When Daniel lifted her gently and wrapped his coat around her, she felt warmth for the first time in what seemed like forever. His presence was calm and steady, and it felt strange to be protected by a man she did not know, a man whose eyes held no judgment, only focus. She stayed quiet, afraid to speak, afraid her voice would shatter the fragile sense of safety around her. The ride to Daniel's ranch was long. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the land in shades of deep blue and gray. The only sounds were the soft steps of the horse and the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. Elena leaned back slightly, wrapped in the coat, feeling both exposed and protected at the same time. She could feel the rhythm of the horse beneath her, a steady motion that seemed to whisper safety, even when her thoughts raced with fear. Daniel did not speak much. He occasionally asked if she was all right, if she could hold on, but his tone was gentle, never forceful. Elena found herself clinging to the sound of his voice, small as it was, because it grounded her. It reminded her that someone had come for her when no one else would, that someone saw her as a person rather than a burden. When they reached the ranch, the first thing Elena noticed was the stillness of the place. Unlike the village, there were no eyes watching her, no judgment waiting for every movement. The house was simple, sturdy, and smelled faintly of wood, hay, and smoke. Daniel led her inside, helping her to sit on a chair near the fireplace. A warm blanket was waiting, and he offered her water and simple food, enough to restore some of her energy. She hesitated at first, but hunger and exhaustion overcame fear, and she took small bites, tasting warmth and life she had not felt in years. For several days, Elena rested. She barely spoke, observing the ranch, the wide open spaces, and the way Daniel moved through his tasks. He tended to animals, repaired fences, and maintained his land with quiet care. She realized that he was not like anyone she had known in the village. He worked with purpose but never tried to control her, never expected her to act a certain way. His respect for her was silent but unmistakable. Elena began to notice small things that gave her hope. The horse grazing near the barn would come close when she spoke softly, trusting her voice. Chickens wandered freely, and she laughed quietly when one of them pecked at her hand. These small successes reminded her that life could continue, that she could be safe and useful without fear of judgment. As the days turned into a week, Elena started sharing pieces of her story cautiously. She told Daniel about her life in the village, the expectations placed upon her, and the way she had been treated for something beyond her control. Daniel listened without interruption, nodding occasionally but never offering advice or judgment. His silence was comforting. It was clear he understood that her words were heavy, and he let her carry them in her own time. In return, Daniel shared small pieces of his own life. He had chosen solitude after losing someone close, someone whose absence had left a void he could not fill. He had learned to find peace in routines, in the rhythm of work, and the trust of animals. His words were few, but Elena understood that he respected honesty, not spectacle. It was a connection built slowly, through shared silence and small conversations rather than dramatic gestures. Elena started to help with chores around the ranch. She mended fences, fed the animals, and cleaned the barn. Each task gave her a sense of purpose, a reminder that she could contribute to life without fear of criticism. Daniel never instructed her harshly, only showing her the easiest methods and allowing her to learn at her own pace. With every completed task, Elena's confidence grew. She realized that strength came not from the approval of others, but from mastering challenges herself. One afternoon while she worked near the stables, a traveler passed by on the nearby road. The traveler looked curious, glancing at the ranch, and Daniel stepped outside to speak with him. Elena stayed back, watching the interaction with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The traveler left after a brief conversation, and Daniel returned smiling faintly. It reminded Elena that the world beyond the ranch existed, that people came and went, and not all encounters were dangerous. Despite her growing comfort, Elena could not completely let go of fear. Memories of the village haunted her, and she worried about what might happen if people discovered where she had gone. She feared judgment, confrontation, or worse. Daniel noticed her unease but did not push her to speak. Instead, he gave her space, allowing her to process emotions at her own pace. This patience helped Elena feel safe enough to think about the future for the first time in years. During quiet evenings, Elena began to speak more openly. She described her hopes, her small dreams for a life where she could choose her own path, and her desire to help others who might be struggling. Daniel listened and sometimes offered suggestions, always gentle and never demanding. They discussed ways to improve the ranch, to make life easier for the animals, and ways to share food or help nearby neighbors discreetly. These discussions were practical, but they also reminded Elena that life could move forward in small, meaningful ways. Weeks passed, and Elena's health improved. Her body grew stronger, and with strength came renewed spirit. She began to take walks around the ranch, exploring hidden paths, observing wildlife, and learning the rhythm of the land. Daniel accompanied her sometimes, but often she went alone, learning independence and regaining confidence. Each step was a reminder that she had survived, that she was not defined by the cruelty she had endured. One day, Elena stood near a small pond at the edge of the property, watching the reflection of the sky ripple in the water. She felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. She had lost years to fear and judgment, but she had also been given a second chance. Her life was not yet complete, but it was hers to shape. Daniel joined her quietly, standing beside her without speaking. The silence was comfortable, a shared acknowledgement that some moments needed no words. Despite the calm, the world beyond the ranch could not be ignored forever. Travelers occasionally brought news of the village, rumors that her disappearance had been noticed, and questions from curious strangers. Elena's heart raced when she heard such news, fearing that her past might return to haunt her. Daniel reassured her in small ways, reminding her that she had choices and that he would help her navigate any challenges. Over time, Elena and Daniel established a routine that felt safe and manageable. They worked during the day, tended to animals, repaired fences, and prepared meals together. Evenings were quiet, often spent sharing stories or simply sitting by the fire. Elena realized that trust and companionship did not have to be dramatic or loud. They could exist in quiet, consistent support. As her confidence returned, Elena began thinking about her future. She considered the possibility of living fully in the world beyond the ranch, interacting with neighbors, and reclaiming the life that had been denied to her. The idea was frightening, but also empowering. She understood that her worth was not defined by past failures or the judgment of others, but by her choices and actions moving forward. By the end of the second month, Elena felt a balance she had not known in years. She had survived an unimaginable situation, found safety, and begun the slow process of rebuilding her life. She understood that challenges remained, but she also knew she had the strength, support, and resilience to face them. The ranch had become more than a safe place. It had become a home where she could grow, heal, and start again. Through each day, Elena learned small truths, that kindness could exist even in the harshest circumstances, that people could act without expectation, and that second chances were possible when someone chose to help without judgment. Daniel's steady presence reinforced these lessons, showing that compassion and quiet strength could restore hope where it had been lost. The days turned into weeks, and Elena realized that her life had shifted dramatically. What had begun as fear, despair, and uncertainty was slowly transforming into confidence, independence, and trust. She understood that she had survived because someone had believed in her right to live, and she carried that belief forward in every action, every word, and every step she took across the ranch. Elena's journey of healing was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope, a quiet, steady light that promised a future where she could live without fear, reclaim her dignity, and define her own path in life. The experience had changed her forever, but it had also given her strength she had never known, and a chance to build a life filled with safety, purpose, and possibility. Elena had begun to feel stronger both in body and in spirit. Each day on the ranch brought small victories that reminded her she was alive, that she could make decisions for herself, and that she did not have to live under the shadow of fear and judgment. The days were long, filled with tasks that required effort and attention, but in those tasks she found comfort. Feeding the animals, mending fences, and tending the garden gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt for years. She learned to move through each day slowly, noticing the details that made life feel alive. The chirping of birds in the morning, the fresh scent of hay, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Daniel observed her quietly, offering guidance when needed but never pressing her. He understood that trust and confidence were fragile at first, and he let Elena take the lead in learning the rhythms of the ranch. Slowly, she began to feel capable in ways she had forgotten were possible. When a young calf struggled to stand, she was there to guide it patiently. When a fence broke during a storm, she learned to repair it carefully, step by step. These small successes were more than chores. They were affirmations that she could handle challenges and contribute meaningfully to life. After a day of work, Elena and Daniel would sit near the fire, letting the warmth sink into their tired muscles. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they simply sat in silence. The silence was comforting, a shared acknowledgement that life did not always need to be loud or filled with words. In these quiet moments, Elena found the courage to think about her future, to imagine a life beyond the ranch and beyond the shadow of her past. She allowed herself to dream, even if only in small, careful ways. Elena began to talk more openly about her experiences in the village. She told Daniel about the way people had treated her, about the fear and loneliness she had carried for so many years. She described the whispers, the cold stares, and the final terrifying decision that had almost ended her life. Speaking about these events was difficult, but it also brought relief. She realized that sharing her story with someone who truly listened without judgment helped her reclaim pieces of herself she thought were lost. Daniel listened with patience, never interrupting or dismissing her experiences. He asked gentle questions to help her clarify her thoughts, but he did not push her to relive the trauma. His quiet presence reassured her, teaching her that trust could exist without pressure, and that safety could be found even after betrayal. Slowly, Elena began to believe that she could live without fear, that her life could be shaped by her own choices, rather than by the whims of others. As the weeks passed, Elena's confidence grew. She took on more responsibilities around the ranch, learning to manage tasks independently. She began to notice changes within herself. Her body was stronger, her mind clearer, and her heart more open to the possibilities of life. She smiled more easily, laughed without hesitation, and allowed herself moments of joy without guilt. The ranch, once a place of temporary refuge, had become a home where she could heal and rebuild. One morning, while checking the fences near the far edge of the property, Elena noticed signs of wildlife that had never been there before. A family of deer grazed near the trees, unafraid of her presence. Birds nested in the branches above, singing as if welcoming her into this quiet world. She paused to watch them, feeling a sense of peace that she had never known in the village. Life had a rhythm here, a flow that was steady and predictable, yet full of small surprises that reminded her of beauty and resilience. Daniel often joined her on these walks, though sometimes she went alone. The solitude was comforting, giving her time to reflect and observe the world around her. She discovered that she could find happiness in simple things: the movement of the wind, the sound of running water, the warmth of the sun on her skin. These moments reminded her that life was not solely defined by fear or judgment. It was also filled with opportunities for discovery and growth. As Elena gained strength, she began to think about the future more seriously. The village was a place of the past, filled with memories of judgment and fear. But the ranch offered a chance to create something new. She imagined a life where she could interact with neighbors without fear, where her choices mattered, and where she could contribute to her community in meaningful ways. The thought was both exciting and frightening, but it gave her hope that life could be different from what she had endured. Daniel noticed the changes in Elena and offered support in quiet ways. He encouraged her to take on new tasks, to explore the land, and to engage with nearby communities if she felt ready. He never forced her to act before she was prepared, understanding that true confidence could only grow from choice and experience. His patience reinforced the lessons Elena had been learning, that trust, respect, and independence were essential to reclaiming her life. One day, as Elena worked in the garden, she encountered a traveler passing near the ranch. The traveler was curious but respectful, asking questions about the land and the animals. Elena answered cautiously, testing her ability to engage with strangers without fear. Daniel stood nearby, offering reassurance through his calm presence. By the end of the encounter, Elena realized she could interact with others safely, that she could navigate the world beyond the ranch without panic or hesitation. Elena's healing was not linear, and there were moments of doubt. Memories of the village occasionally resurfaced, bringing anxiety and sorrow. She sometimes feared that her past could catch up with her, that she might be forced to confront the people who had judged her so harshly. Yet each time fear arose, she found strength in the lessons she had learned on the ranch. That resilience was built through small actions, that safety could be found in preparation and awareness, and that support could exist without judgment or expectation. Through daily routines and quiet reflection, Elena began to form a clearer sense of self. She understood that her worth was not tied to the opinions of others, to tradition, or to past failures. She was capable, strong, and deserving of respect. Each day on the ranch reinforced this understanding as she completed tasks, engaged with life, and observed the world around her with fresh eyes. As the months passed, Elena began to see opportunities for growth and connection beyond the ranch. She considered reaching out to nearby communities, sharing her skills, and helping others who might be struggling. The idea of contributing to the world in meaningful ways excited her, offering a sense of purpose that had been absent for so long. She realized that she could choose how to live her life, and that possibility gave her courage and motivation. Evenings remained a time of reflection and calm. Elena and Daniel often sat together, sharing stories or simply observing the stars above. The quiet moments allowed her to process her experiences and to appreciate the life she was building. The ranch had become more than a safe haven. It was a place of growth, learning, and healing. In its routines and rhythms, Elena found stability and a sense of belonging she had not known before. Elena began to imagine a future where her past no longer controlled her, where she could live fully and confidently. She envisioned herself interacting with neighbors, pursuing personal goals, and contributing to the lives of others. Each small step on the ranch reinforced the possibility of this future, reminding her that she had survived the worst and could now shape her life on her own terms. Through careful observation, consistent effort, and patient guidance from Daniel, Elena continued to rebuild her confidence and independence. She learned that life was not only about survival but about growth, connection, and the courage to embrace new opportunities. The ranch offered both safety and freedom, and she began to see that her story was no longer defined by fear, but by resilience and hope. As Elena continued to heal, she felt a quiet determination growing within her. She knew that challenges remained, that the world beyond the ranch might still hold difficulties and fears. Yet she also understood that she possessed the strength, skills, and support needed to face those challenges. Each day reinforced the lesson that life could be rebuilt, that dignity could be restored, and that hope could flourish, even after the most difficult experiences. By the end of this period, Elena felt a sense of balance she had not known in years. She had survived her past, found safety, and begun to reclaim her life. Her days were filled with meaningful work, moments of reflection, and opportunities to grow. The ranch had become a place of healing and possibility, offering her the chance to rebuild not just her body and spirit, but her understanding of life itself. Elena had grown stronger in body and spirit, yet she knew that her past could not stay buried forever. The quiet life on the ranch had given her time to heal, to regain confidence, and to learn that she was more than the judgments and fears of the village. But news traveled slowly, even to remote places, and travelers occasionally brought bits of information from nearby towns. One day Daniel noticed a small group approaching the ranch from a distant road. Their movements were hesitant, uncertain, yet purposeful. He rode out to meet them, leaving Elena to watch from the porch, her heart beating faster as she realized that the world beyond the ranch was reaching toward her. The visitors were not hostile, but they carried the weight of curiosity and authority. They asked questions carefully, as though probing without intending harm. Elena stayed behind the railing, unsure if she wanted to confront these strangers. Daniel's calm presence reassured her, reminding her that she could face this moment on her own terms. Slowly she stepped forward, letting her voice be heard. She spoke simply, clearly, and without fear. The strangers listened, noting her strength and composure. It became clear to Elena that she did not have to hide forever, that she could interact with others without losing herself. Over the next few days, Elena considered what her future might look like. Returning to the village was an option, but it carried the risk of judgment and humiliation. Staying on the ranch provided safety, but also the possibility of isolation from the wider world. She reflected on the life she wanted, one that allowed her to make choices, to contribute, and to be respected for who she was, rather than for past expectations. Daniel never pushed her toward a decision, instead offering guidance when asked, and steady support at all times. His patience reinforced the idea that she could control her own life. Elena began to prepare for the possibility of stepping beyond the ranch. She explored nearby paths, learning the terrain and the rhythm of the surrounding area. She practiced speaking with travelers who passed by, gradually growing comfortable with social interaction. Each successful conversation, each moment of independence, built her confidence. She realized that the skills she had developed on the ranch, patience, observation, resilience, were valuable beyond its fences. As she practiced these new skills, Elena also reflected on forgiveness and boundaries. She thought about the village and the people who had judged her harshly. Anger and sorrow arose, but she decided that her own peace was more important than seeking revenge. She would not allow their past cruelty to control her present or future. Instead, she focused on what she could do: live fully, live freely, and create a life that reflected her strength and dignity. The community beyond the ranch began to take notice of Elena. Neighbors saw her tending to animals, managing the property, and moving through the land with confidence. Some were curious about her story, others respectful of her abilities and independence. She realized that the world was not entirely hostile, that people could be kind, helpful, and accepting when approached with honesty and confidence. This realization gave her hope that she could expand her life safely without compromising the progress she had made. During quiet evenings, Elena and Daniel spoke about dreams and possibilities. They discussed ways to improve the ranch, to grow food more efficiently, and to provide shelter for animals in need. These practical discussions were also opportunities to talk about life, trust, and the value of patience. Elena shared her aspirations, imagining a life where she could contribute to others, help those in need, and live without fear of judgment. Daniel offered insights based on his years of experience, always with a gentle hand and respectful tone. One day, a small group from a nearby town arrived, seeking advice on animal care and ranching. Elena welcomed them cautiously, demonstrating her skills and knowledge. She guided them through simple tasks, explaining each step carefully. The visitors were impressed by her competence and confidence. For the first time, she felt recognition for her abilities rather than judgment for her past. This experience strengthened her belief that she could interact with the wider world safely and meaningfully. Despite these successes, Elena remained cautious. She knew that the village might still harbor negative opinions, and she prepared for the possibility that her past could resurface. She developed strategies to navigate encounters carefully, to speak clearly and calmly, and to maintain her boundaries. Each practice reinforced her sense of control and independence. She understood that while the past could not be erased, she could choose how it affected her future. As the seasons changed, Elena and Daniel adapted to the rhythms of life on the ranch. Spring brought new growth, summer long days filled with work, autumn the harvest and preparation for winter. Each season offered lessons in patience, planning, and resilience. Elena found satisfaction in these cycles, appreciating the way life moved forward steadily and predictably. She began to see parallels between the land and her own life. Growth required care, attention, and persistence. Elena also discovered joy in small moments. She laughed freely when young animals played, smiled when the wind carried scents of the earth, and felt pride when her work contributed to the ranch's success. These moments reminded her that happiness was available in simple things, and that life could be fulfilling without dramatic gestures or recognition. She learned that peace and joy could be cultivated through attention, care, and presence. Over time, Elena considered expanding her connections beyond the ranch. She envisioned helping neighbors discreetly, sharing skills, and contributing to the community without fear or compromise. She realized that she could build relationships based on respect, mutual support, and trust. These thoughts were empowering, offering a sense of purpose that extended beyond personal survival. Elena's healing also involved reflection on her own identity. She understood that she was not defined by the cruelty or judgment of others. Her value came from her actions, her resilience, and her ability to navigate life with strength and dignity. Each day reinforced this understanding. As she successfully managed tasks, interacted with visitors, and maintained the ranch independently, She felt a sense of pride that had been absent for years. One evening, Daniel and Elena sat together under a clear sky. The stars reflected in a small pond nearby, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of the ranch settling for the night. They spoke quietly about the future, about possibilities and choices, and about the ways they could contribute meaningfully to life. The conversation was calm, thoughtful, and filled with hope. Elena felt that she was no longer a passive participant in life, but an active agent shaping her own path. As months passed, Elena continued to grow in confidence and independence. She navigated interactions with the world beyond the ranch, managed responsibilities with skill, and nurtured a sense of self that was strong and resilient. She understood that challenges would continue, but she also recognized her capacity to face them. The experiences on the ranch had equipped her with practical skills, emotional resilience, and a sense of purpose that could guide her through life. Elena also began to see the impact of her story on others. Her resilience inspired those who heard her tale, demonstrating that strength could emerge from hardship and that courage could create new opportunities. Daniel witnessed these changes, recognizing that Elena's growth was not only personal, but also a source of hope for the wider community. Their partnership, built on mutual respect and trust, reinforced the lesson that compassion and patience could empower those who had suffered. Despite progress, Elena remained grounded. She continued to work on the ranch, tend the animals, and care for the land. She maintained routines that offered stability while exploring new opportunities for growth and connection. She understood that healing was ongoing, that strength required continual practice, and that independence was cultivated through consistent effort. Each day reinforced her understanding of life, resilience, and the value of intentional choices. Elena began to envision a future where her past did not control her. She imagined interacting safely with neighbors, sharing skills, contributing to the community, and building a life defined by choice and dignity. These visions motivated her, giving each day purpose and meaning. She realized that the possibilities for life were broader than she had ever imagined, and that her experiences had prepared her to seize them with courage and wisdom. By the end of this period, Helena had transformed her life. She had reclaimed safety, independence, and a sense of purpose. The ranch was no longer simply a refuge. It was a place of growth, empowerment, and possibility. She had learned that life could be rebuilt through careful effort, thoughtful reflection, and courageous engagement with the world. Elena's journey demonstrated that even after profound fear and hardship, strength, hope, and dignity could be restored. Elena had grown in ways she never imagined possible. Her time on the ranch had given her more than safety. It had given her strength, purpose, and hope. Every day she moved with confidence, tending to the animals, maintaining the land, and learning new skills. She discovered that life was not just about survival. It was about creating, nurturing, and shaping the world around her. Each task she completed reminded her that she could rely on herself and that she was capable of facing whatever challenges life presented. As the months passed, Elena became fully integrated into the rhythm of the ranch. She could care for the animals with skill and patience, repair fences and barns without hesitation, and prepare food from the garden that was nourishing and abundant. These accomplishments, though ordinary in appearance, gave her a sense of independence and achievement she had never known in the village.
She realized that her worth was not tied to the opinions of others, but to her actions, her dedication, and her courage.
Daniel continued to support her, but now their partnership was more equal. He trusted her judgment, sought her input on decisions about the ranch, and valued her perspective. Elena felt a sense of belonging and respect she had never experienced before. In Daniel's calm presence, she understood that a relationship could be built on mutual support, trust, and patience rather than fear, obligation, or expectation. She began to believe that life could be gentle and fair, and that she was worthy of care and consideration. One morning, Elena walked to the edge of the property, looking out over the fields that stretched into the horizon. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm glow over the land. She thought about the village she had left behind and the life she had endured there. Fear, judgment, and rejection had once defined her existence, but now she understood that those experiences were only part of her story. She had survived, and she had grown stronger because of it. The past no longer controlled her. It had shaped her into someone resilient and capable. Elena began to think about sharing her story with others, not for recognition or praise, but to inspire hope and understanding. She realized that people who had suffered could find strength in learning that recovery and rebuilding were possible. Daniel encouraged her gently, reminding her that she could choose what to share, when to share it, and with whom. This guidance helped her feel confident that she could make a positive impact while maintaining her own safety and dignity. As time went on, visitors from nearby towns began to seek her advice. They were drawn by her skill with animals, her knowledge of the land, and the calm confidence she exuded. Elena welcomed them, teaching carefully, demonstrating techniques, and offering guidance with patience. Each interaction reinforced her understanding that she could engage with the world safely, that she could contribute meaningfully, and that her past experiences did not define her future. She felt pride in her abilities and satisfaction in helping others learn and grow. Elena also began to explore personal dreams she had once thought impossible. She learned new skills, experimented with planting different crops, and considered expanding the ranch in ways that could benefit others. She imagined creating a place where animals and people alike could find care, comfort, and opportunity. Each idea she explored was a step toward reclaiming control over her life and shaping it according to her values and passions. At the same time, Elena remained mindful of the world beyond the ranch. She considered how she might reconnect with the community from which she had once been rejected. She thought carefully about whom she could trust, how she could maintain her safety, and how she could assert her independence while contributing meaningfully. These reflections strengthened her resolve, showing her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The bond between Elena and Daniel deepened over time. They worked together seamlessly, each respecting the strengths and boundaries of the other. Their partnership was built on mutual understanding, shared responsibility, and quiet companionship. They learned to communicate through actions, gestures, and glances as much as through words. Elena discovered that relationships could be fulfilling without being controlling, that love and trust could grow naturally when nurtured with care and patience. One day, Elena noticed a group of villagers approaching from the distant road. Rumors of her survival had spread, and curiosity had drawn them to the ranch. At first, she felt a flicker of anxiety, remembering the fear and judgment she had endured in the past. But she also recognized that she now had choice and agency. She stepped forward calmly, deciding how to engage with them on her terms. When the villagers saw her composed and confident, they realized that she had survived, thrived, and claimed her own life in ways they could not have imagined. Elena spoke to them simply and clearly, sharing what she felt comfortable sharing. She did not seek vengeance or confrontation. Instead, she communicated her boundaries, her independence, and the dignity she had reclaimed. The villagers listened, some with shame, some with curiosity, and others with admiration for her strength. She realized that she could face the past without allowing it to dominate her present or future. This understanding reinforced her confidence and her sense of empowerment. After the visitors left, Elena reflected on how far she had come. She had faced near certain harm, survived unimaginable fear, and now stood strong, independent, and respected. She had built a life on her own terms, one filled with purpose, skill, and quiet joy. The lessons she had learned, the importance of resilience, trust, patience, and self-worth, would guide her for the rest of her life. She understood that true freedom came from taking control of one's own choices and shaping one's destiny. In the following weeks, Elena began to take steps toward long-term growth. She explored ways to expand the ranch, improve care for animals, and share her skills more broadly. She connected with other people in the surrounding area, building relationships grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Each step strengthened her independence and reinforced her ability to thrive outside the shadows of her past. She discovered that hope and resilience were not fleeting feelings, but qualities that could be nurtured through consistent effort, reflection, and courage. Evenings at the ranch became moments of reflection and gratitude. Elena often watched the sun set over the fields, appreciating the calm, the beauty, and the opportunities before her. She thought about the hardship she had endured and the strength she had discovered within herself. Each day was a reminder that she had survived, that she had reclaimed her life, and that she had the ability to continue shaping it with intention and care. As seasons passed, Elena's story became one of quiet inspiration. People who visited the ranch noticed her strength, resilience, and competence. She showed that life could be rebuilt even after profound fear and hardship. Daniel witnessed her transformation, proud of the courage, determination, and growth she had achieved. Together, they had created a home defined by safety, respect, and opportunity, a place where healing could continue and life could flourish. Elena realized that the lessons she had learned were not only personal, but universal. She understood that courage could emerge in the face of adversity, that independence was built through consistent action, and that compassion and trust could guide people toward healing and growth. These insights shaped how she approached life, relationships, and her future. She embraced the idea that life was to be lived fully, with awareness, purpose, and the freedom to make choices. In the quiet of the ranch, Elena reflected on her journey. She remembered the fear, the judgment, and the moments of despair, but she also remembered the acts of kindness, the steady presence of Daniel, and the possibilities that had opened before her. She recognized that every step she had taken had brought her closer to independence, dignity, and fulfillment. Life had tested her, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to continue shaping her own path. By the end of this chapter of her life, Elena was no longer defined by the cruelty or fears of others. She had claimed her own story, nurtured her independence, and built a home filled with hope and purpose. The ranch was not only a sanctuary, but a place of growth, opportunity, and resilience. Elena had learned that the most powerful changes come from within, that strength could be cultivated, and that life, even after hardship, could be rich, meaningful, and full of possibility. Her future remained unwritten, but she faced it with confidence, knowledge, and courage. She understood that she could navigate challenges, embrace opportunities, and build a life defined by her choices. The lessons she had learned on the ranch, patience, resilience, skill, and trust, would guide her for years to come. Elena had survived, healed, and flourished, proving that even after the darkest experiences, hope, strength, and dignity could be reclaimed and nurtured.